Quote, who is a pronoun that acknowledges our humanity, our personhood? We're supposed to refer to the trash that we took out or the table that we discovered at a flea market. We're not supposed to refer to people that come with a legal visa and overstay. That's just an example of, people that. Do you also object to it?
No. Oh, well, yeah, I do. But I certainly do. But one of the problems has always been the who and the whom part, and that's always been confusing for a lot of people. But I think grammar is certainly something that's changed considerably in the last few years.
This is the salient point in this piece in the New York Times. It's an op-ed piece. My fear is that there's a metaphor here, something about the age of automation, about the disappearing line between humans and machines. The robots are coming, and maybe we're killing off who to avoid the pain of having them demand it and get it.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Jim, and say I do not think this matters that much. And I think there's just this absolute irritating tendency of people to feel big about themselves for pointing out mistakes. And I think it's a deplorable tendency. I think you should assume that someone who does not see that mistake themselves has not shared your advantages.
Are there unforgivable mistakes, however?
Oh, well, look,
because
if this is the biggest thing you think has gone wrong lately, I think you have lost perspective.
All right, the way we mangle language is a constant theme, and we get constant examples flooding in. So here are a couple. I hate people using less rather than fewer for things you can count. I think that battle's lost, actually.
I hate child slavery. I hate things that are, in fact, important.
You don't think language is important?
I do think language is important, but I think communication is more important. And I think that pointing out mistakes, and I understand the mistake of fewer and less than, I should say. But I think it's sort of arranging the deck chairs on the Titanic to make that something you are considerably excised about.
What about the awful creeping K?
The anythink.
Yeah.
Anythink.
Well, again, I just attempt to model using a G.
Hugh says, I have heard the awful creeping K from the mouths of street kids and High Court counsel, journalists and diplomats, mothers, miners and police. A disease that pervades society.
I
I understand
if we're
what
losing perspective here.
Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying, Joe, but I think there are some type of standards that you do want to keep to at times, and if you just wipe it all, then we're just going to grunt and groan, aren't we, if there's no real grammar behind us?
I think people that think that have lost a degree of perspective, and I put a little Easter egg in there for you, Jim.
Thank you.
Someone asks, Barry, have you noticed what's happened to the T in Canterbury? It's gone.
Yes. Everyone says Canterbury.
Barry Corbett, thank you for your company today.
Always a pleasure, and it's been lovely being with Joe as well.
Joe McCarroll.
Thanks, Barry.
Nice to have you on too, Joe. Thank you. Come back soon. And we are back tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. And Checkpoint with John Campbell follows.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to what's almost Checkpoint tonight. Batten down the hatches, stay indoors. The Met Service warns people to stay at home as what may be the worst storm in decades bears down on New Zealand across a broad area. A state of emergency has just been declared in Coromandel ahead of Cyclone Cook. We cross to Coromandel Live. We go to Great Barrier Island and to Edgecombe. We're with Ursula Mayo. As she learns her house is unlivable, she returns to it for the first time. She has lost everything, plus 3 more former Sarah staff are to undergo investigation after allegations of conflicts of interest. 24/7 police bases, 20 of them to open across the country. Where and why did they get them? It's a busy old Checkpoint. Stay with us. We'll be back after Katrina and the news, which is coming up.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batana ho. Met Service says it hasn't seen a storm like Cyclone Cook since the one in 1968 that sank the ferry Wahine off Wellington, killing 52 people. A spokeswoman for Met Service, Lisa Murray, says the public aren't taking the approaching storm seriously enough. She says the whole of the North Island and much of the South Island will be affected when the intense storm hits land at about 6 tomorrow night. But she says high winds and downpours will start earlier. Lisa Murray says she's worked at Met Service for 12 years and has never seen weather like this.
It's a really deep, tightly packed low. The isobars are really tight. Going to see some really strong winds. We could see gusts of up to 150 kilometres per hour or even more for some exposed places. We're expecting more rainfall accumulations meeting warning criteria, and that's on top of the rain that's already fallen for some of these regions.
Lisa Murray says people should stock up on supplies in case of power cuts and road closures, avoid travel and stay up to date with warnings. A civil defence emergency has just been declared for the Thames Coromandel district. The Mayor, Sandra Godey, says the high likelihood that Cyclone Cook will hit the Coromandel Peninsula, bringing heavy rain tomorrow, is a major concern. She says some residents live in low coastal areas and may need to be evacuated. Ms Godey is warning any holiday makers to stay away from the Coromandel area until at least Saturday, or potentially face closed roads and being cut off. And authorities are warning torrential rain could cut off the eastern Bay of Plenty in the next 2 days. The entire Bay of Plenty is under a state of emergency as the approaching storm threatens the rain-soaked region. Sharon Brett-Kelly reports.
The chair of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, Doug Leader, says the focus has been on the impact of more rain on flood-hit Edgecombe. But he warns the bad weather could cut off the main road to towns like Whakatane and Opotiki. He says if access is lost through the Waiaweka Gorge to Gisborne, State Highway 30 to Rotorua and the Matata Strait to Tauranga, the eastern Bay of Plenty will be cut off. The Whakatane District Mayor Tony Bond says he is confident people will be given early warning to evacuate. He says the biggest threat is stormwater flooding, and he's urging people in slip-prone places like Ohope Beach to evacuate if there is a danger. This is Sharon Brett-Kelly.
Nelson Police have confirmed human remains found in a car recovered from Nelson Harbour last week are those of the missing man Leo Lip Neighbours. The 19-year-old went missing with his vehicle in January 2010, and Nelson Police are now trying to find out how it ended up in the harbour. The part owner of the Scenic Hotel Group, Lani Hageman, says she will continue to pursue the Labour leader, Andrew Little, in court for defaming her husband. On Monday, a jury in the High Court could not reach a majority agreement on 4 of the Hageman's claims of defamation. The jury found a 5th claim was defamatory, but could not agree on whether Mr Little had qualified privilege at the time he made it. Lani Hageman says she's been advised by her legal team that Mr Little was not entitled to protection by privilege. The High Court in Auckland has ruled that excessive defamation damages against Colin Craig constitute a miscarriage of justice. Last September, a jury found Mr Craig, the former Conservative Party leader, guilty of defaming the Taxpayers Union founder Jordan Williams. The jury awarded $1.27 million in damages, the highest ever amount in a New Zealand defamation case. In reviewing the case, Justice Sarah Katz says the damages are well outside any reasonable range. She says there'll either have to be a retrial or the 2 parties could agree to accept a new damages awards. Te Tai Tokoro MP Kelvin Davis says boosting the police presence in Northland has been a long time coming, especially in Kaitaia, where he says staff are struggling with the workload. The police have announced round-the-clock police bases in Kaitaia, Matamata, Wairoa and Rolleston, with another 16 from next year. Kelvin Davis says he'd also like to see some education programs rolled out in Kaitaia and for police to be out more in the community.
I don't just want them to come in there and just start locking up more and more people. We've got to have a different approach to combating crime. We've got to be smarter on crime rather than being harder on crime.
MP Kelvin Davis. The minister responsible for post-earthquake Christchurch, Jerry Brownlee, says there's no reason to hold a broad inquiry into staff conduct. 3 more people are now being investigated for possible conflicts of interest at what used to be the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority. 2 former officials referred to the Serious Fraud Office for serious misconduct passed on information about other possible cases while they were being investigated. Labor wants a broad inquiry, saying investigating just the 3 new cases is not enough. But Jerry Brownlee says a report by Mike Herring QC was comprehensive and it's appropriate to investigate other allegations that have arisen as a result. It's 5:05. To sport, and Crusaders prop Wyatt Crockett will pay his 176th Super Rugby game against the Japan Sunwolves on Friday, the most appearances by any player. Crockett will overtake his former All Blacks teammate Kevin Mialamu's record for the most capped player. All Black captain Kieran Reid will also make his first appearance of 2017 this week. He missed the start of the season due to a wrist injury. The Northern Mystics coach Helene Wilson is confident her side can turn their season around after losing their opening 2 matches of the ANZ Premiership. The Mystics lost to the Central Pulse by a single goal in week 1 and were competitive against the Southern Steel right up until the final 5 minutes when they fell apart defensively. Wilson says there'll be no such mishaps tonight when they face the Northern Stars in their first Auckland derby in Manukau.
This week we have been working on execution and practice, making sure that the type of ball delivery that we have is quality and that we keep the ball moving fast so it's harder for the defence to pick off.
Northern Mystics coach Helene Wilson. Tip-offs at 7:40 tonight. And the defending world champions, the New Zealand men's sprint team, will be among the first riders on track when the world champs begin in Hong Kong tonight. The trio of Ethan Mitchell, Sam Webster and Eddie Dawkins will attempt to defend the rainbow jerseys they won in London last year. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Todd Addett and James Trapp, specialists in the mostly underground world of mycorrhizal fungi, the life form that brings you truffles. But that's not the half of it. And Liat Collins joins us from Israel, where they are still smarting over the UN resolution condemning its Jewish settlement program. Apparently many Israelis find it hard to believe New Zealand could have sponsored such a thing. On Nights, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and severe weather warnings and watches are in force, including damaging winds and significant rainfall over northern and central New Zealand. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the central high country, periods of rain with heavy falls, localised downpours and possible thunderstorms, severe gales for a time tomorrow afternoon or evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, occasional rain, heavy tomorrow, especially about the ranges with possible severe gales. Whanganui to Wellington, periods of rain, heavy at times, severe gales late tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, periods of rain with heavy falls, localised downpours and possible thunderstorms, easing for a time later today until early tomorrow. Westland and Canterbury, occasional rain with some heavy falls possible for a time. Otago and Southland, rain with heavy falls, easing tomorrow afternoon. Fiordland, scattered rain, and the Chatham Islands, occasional rain. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Coming up on the show tonight, Sarah, 3 more staffers being investigated, Spicer, Assad and Hitler, and how putting people into their own home is cheaper over the long term than social housing. Don't forget you can watch us if you're anywhere near a screen. We are on Freeview Channel 50, the RNZ website, or Face TV, which is Sky Channel 83. However you are joining us, thank you for doing so. We begin tonight with the weather, and there's been so much bad weather of late that it may be tempting to shrug a resigned shoulder, get the washing in and not worry too much about it. But in many parts of the country, that may be wrong. When Cyclone Cook arrives at roughly this time tomorrow, she could contain a wallop not seen over such large areas of the country for decades. The state of emergency has already been declared across the Bay of Plenty, and in the past hour in the Coromandel. We go to both places live shortly. Dunedin residents have also been warned that they may have to evacuate if the weather worsens tonight. Cyclone Cook will hit Great Barrier Island at about lunchtime tomorrow. We'll go there shortly. She'll then track down beside Coromandel, and directly hit land in the Western Bay of Plenty in almost exactly 24 hours from now. Those areas will see strong winds and very heavy rain. From there, she'll head south, passing close to Wellington overnight tomorrow, then hitting Banks Peninsula on Friday morning. Coastal areas will get storm surges. Many places will get torrential rain. The Met Service's Georgina Griffiths says not many of us will be spared its impact.
We're very concerned around this system because, of course, it comes hard on the heels of a very wet period in the northeast, and it's such a national event. We have watches and warnings in place for all of the North Island, some for rain, some for wind, sub-regions for both. We're also very concerned around the coastal impacts of Cyclone Cook as she comes into the Bay of Plenty, very close to Great Barrier Island, large northeasterly swells. When you have storm force or hurricane force winds over the sea, those waves are going to get really big. We also see sea level rise, up to 30 to 35 centimetre storm surge associated with the system, starting from late tomorrow morning, but especially tomorrow afternoon.
Which means
and
high tides could potentially be disastrous, right? If you add the storm surges, the tides, and the rainfall.
And that wind and onshore component. So the Bay of Plenty, Coromandel, coastal impact there is expected.
Is this bypassing Auckland, or is it hitting Auckland as well?
No, it's been a long time since Auckland had a near or very close to near hit or near miss from a tropical cyclone, John. And this is, it's still not guaranteed it won't track down the Firth of Thames. That's a lower probability outcome. We're still expecting down towards Matakana Island, Waihi, the Eastern Coromandel option. Nevertheless, this is going to be really impactful for Auckland. Already had really high intensity rainfalls today. We expect further bursts of downpours tomorrow, and the numbers are getting even higher than we saw today. We might see 50 millimetres in 1 hour tomorrow in the region. And, the region is vulnerable. We have landslides already. We have still roads closed from those previous events. So from a rainfall point of view, putting 200 millimetres in or 150 millimetres in for Auckland, they're huge numbers for us, especially because we're impacted. From a wind point of view, when Cyclone Cook, no matter which path she actually does take, travels by the region, we are likely to see a period of 2 to 3 hours where we're going to be impacted from a transportation point of view.
So what are we talking about, ferries?
Yes, ferries aren't going to be able to run for a couple of hours.
Harbour Bridge?
Harbour Bridge is probable that we're going to have some impact on the Harbour Bridge. Now, they have various thresholds of when they have to, no high-sided vehicles, of course, that's pretty much a given. We may get to the point where they can't run people across the bridge for a short period of time tomorrow afternoon. We're putting gusts to 140 kilometres an hour in for Auckland. And again, that will impact on airports. That's a damaging gust from an airplane point of view. And whilst it is only a short period of severe gales for Auckland, it happens when people are going to try and go away for Easter. The landslips, of course, and the travel plans for people trying to go away tomorrow, you're going to have to check in with the roads, your transportation links, really carefully plan about whether you even want to go away until things are settled down, because we will see landslips, we will see roads gone, we will see flash flooding at some point in the next 48 hours in the upper North Island. All those hotspots, those holiday places like Coromandel and parts of North Auckland, also Bay of Plenty, where people do travel to, the Waikato. So again, wind and rain in that upper North Island area, probably going to impact on people's travel plans. So just check in with the Met Service forecast, check in with NZTA around roading, check in with Civil Defence if you live in the Bay of Plenty, because they're already on state of emergency.
These are strong words you're using.
And they are, because we're quite concerned around this event from a national point of view, from an impactful point of view.
And what is it that is so impactful? Is it, so it's moving fast towards us,
yes.
It's got high winds and a lot of rain?
That's right. So the impact comes from, this is it's really fast coming down from the tropics. Whilst it has lost most of its tropical characteristics, these bolters that come down, like Bowler, like Wahine, and the track is very similar to Giselle.
So Giselle was Wahine's storm?
That's right. And they retain potency. They retain a fair amount of oof when they come in.
Because they arrive with it. They've still got it. It hasn't been exhausted.
So leading ahead of it, they're like a bow wave ahead of it, of those winds and that pressure drop. And those are when we see the biggest impacts. And, remembering this is a tight system, very small system, but packing a huge punch. And those winds are going to go right round the clock for those areas, Coromandel, Great Barrier Island, Western Bay of Plenty and southeast Auckland, the Clevedon areas of the world, Waiheke Island, where those winds are going to go right round the clock, 360 degrees, very short period of time, and they're going to be severe gale. So things are going to fall over, especially after the heavy rain.
You mentioned Wahine. Of course, that was a storm that was famously impactful in Wellington.
Yes.
What's going to happen in the capital and on the other side of Cook Strait?
Well, it looks like, depending on the exact track, the capital will see brief, in fact all of the North Island sees a brief burst of severe gale or gale. So we have wind warnings, of severe gales everywhere, including for Wellington. Luckily for us, I think it happens in the overnight period for much of the lower North Island, including Wellington, and just check in with the forecast. I guess from a maritime sense, this is a big event, so we've been talking to Harbour Master and Coast Guard and Maritime Safety, and if you're thinking of going out on a boat, folks, and I won't be going out on mine tomorrow, check in with the marine forecast. They've got some really big numbers there, and we haven't bothered to put wind direction. We've just got clockwise winds 50 knots or clockwise winds 60 knots. The wind change is going to make those seas dangerous. The swells are large in the northeast of the country, and of course storm surge for those Bay of Plenty, Coromandel and Great Barrier areas.
When did we last see a storm like this?
Yeah, people have been asking me that, and I haven't had a great deal of time to have a look, but it must be a while because I can't remember it, and I've got an elephantine memory when it comes to weather events in New Zealand. I suspect it's in the decades, from a really high impact cyclone coming down with full force and affecting a large part of New Zealand. We're in the decades here, I think. Been a while.
Georgina Griffiths from the Met Service. Great Barrier Island, 100 kilometres northeast of Auckland, will be hit by Cyclone Cook first at about lunchtime tomorrow. On the island, population roughly 950. They've received briefings from the Met Service and Civil Defence about what to expect. Izzy Fordham is the local board chairperson, and she says they've been told in no uncertain terms they're in for a rough few hours.
So with that, we can also expect gale force winds, flooding, storm surge of approximately 35 metres they're talking about throughout Cook's Hit. Northeast coast, probably it's slightly worse than our western side of our island. All in all, a shit of a day.
Yeah, that's nicely put. No, I think that's a fair way of putting it. And you have been briefed, you are ready for this, and you are battening down the hatches.
Well, we're doing the best we can, yes. We've got quite a good communication service here on the island through our own networks. So we've got the message out to all our communities, our vulnerable people through our health team here. Schools, we've advised them to close tomorrow, so they've taken that on board, giving the kids an extra day off. Just basically saying to people, stay home, stay warm and stay safe, and make sure you've got drinking water in there with you until this passes. And then, of course, we'll have to deal with whatever is left after that.
Great Barrier Community Board Chairperson Izzy Fordham. They've just declared a state of emergency in Coromandel. We'll go there live shortly. Let's go first to the Bay of Plenty and our reporter Zach Fleming, who is in Edgecombe. Zach, Cook is hitting there about this time tomorrow night. What's the weather like there now?
Well, John, I'm standing just outside of Edgecombe at the Edgecombe Fire Station, which has been set up as a sort of command centre since last Thursday, and I can tell you it's very much pouring with rain here. It's been pouring down since almost around midday, almost on cue. And the Sodden Bay of Plenty, which Whakatane and Edgecombe is obviously a part of, is expected to be very much the worst hit by this weather. It could get up to 250 millimetres of rain between now and midnight Thursday, which would obviously bring with it severe flooding. And locals I spoke to today are very anxious about that. They're keeping a keen eye on what the Met Service is saying.
And Zach, Simon Bridges was in town today. We'll hear more from his visit to flood-stricken homes in a moment. But he also met with business leaders, right?
Yeah, many of those business leaders were hoping he would announce a business support package today. He didn't do that, saying that it was too early, he didn't have enough information, and because of the coming weather as well. He did kind of hint that a business support package wouldn't be coming though, instead that just they would get some kind of support. He said that would be coming in the coming days, probably by the end of this week or the start of next week. Now, this fire station that I'm standing in front of right now is where Edgecombe residents will find out if they need to evacuate. The fire alarm here will go off and sound, and it's audible from the majority of Edgecombe, and fire trucks will also drive around Edgecombe warning people. And that's also what the Whakatane Mayor Tony Bon echoed today. He urged people that they need to be prepared to evacuate with a moment's notice.
We're anxious about our stormwater system. We've spent over the last few years quite a few million on it, upgrading it, but these major storm events, sometimes they are overwhelmed. So what we're trying to do is, there are low-lying areas of Whakatane and Edgecombe, so we were just wanting people to be prepared. That's the thing. If we're prepared, we're going to get through this a lot easier. We've been in touch with our hinterland. We've had, and that's really roading issues. They're quite comfortable to get down. I'm just saying to people, don't go out looking. Get home tonight, and the safest place is at your home, so stay at home.
And the Bay of Plenty Regional Council Chair, Doug Leader, was standing right next to him and also stressed in no uncertain terms how bad this weather could be.
I think one of the biggest things from the regional decision we made yesterday is access to the Bay of Plenty. So if we lose access through the Waiweka Gorge through to Gisborne, State Highway 30 through to Rotorua and the Matata Straits, which is historically a very difficult area to manage in heavy rainfall events, essentially the Eastern Bay of Plenty has a high likelihood of being cut off.
That is the Bay of Plenty Regional Council Chairman Doug Leader, a high likelihood of being cut off. More on that region and what's going to happen tomorrow coming up. Last Thursday, when the flooding hit Edgecombe, we spoke to Tau Hahepene, who went to the flood zone to rescue his mother-in-law. The water was so high and strong he couldn't get a U-turn, so he and a mate took a truck and trailer in, and they ended up taking 25 people out on the back of the trailer. Tau's Ark, as it was called, made it onto the BBC. But the novelty of the rescue obscured what had been left behind, homes. And when Tau and his mother-in-law Ursula finally got to go back, Ursula's home was beyond repair. This is what the waters did in Edgecombe, as filmed by Tau himself.
We're at 18 Rata. Just going to have a quick look around.
If you're listening, the pictures of Oak Christchurch's eastern suburbs a day or two after bad liquefaction.
You see it's a no-go.
No-go is sprayed on the window, and there's a dreaded red sticker too.
Here we are inside the house. See the water level here?
The water has defied doors, walls and gravity.
Quite devastating there, Ashley.
Just stuff is flooded from the bedrooms to the house.
The house is actually leaning over about half a metre back. Come around here, Ursula.
It truly looks like earthquake damage. The water was that deep and the flow that strong. Tau takes the camera around the corner. There's still surface flooding here. You can see the neighbours now. Cracked brick walls, a jumble of debris, chaos. And inside, where Ursula and Noel used to watch the telly.
Have a look inside the house. There's a picture of me and my wife, nice and safe. Aaron is marching girls. TV's had it.
TV's had it. Almost everything's had it. And it gets worse.
So the back of the house has actually dropped about 2 metres. Big trench there. This is going to be a major repairs.
If you've ever lived through a flood, you know this. But if you're fortunate enough not to have, the water can lift a house right off its foundations. And when it goes, the bricks and mortar sink back to the level of whatever has remained. It's all so utterly inexact. The land cracks and sinks, and the house settles back with it to be less than it was. Tau's camera swings around. There's a street of homes like this.
So we're going to hurry up before the rain comes. Come back around this way.
Here, concrete is split and broken. Tau's briefly distracted, but to the left, almost out of shot, you can actually see the underside of the neighbour's house. It's amazing how much damage the water has done.
So,
That's Jermaine's.
Yeah, we'll go down here.
Right?
Yep. We'll go around. So this is where I got Ursula, where she was current going through. This was her driveway.
Ursula can barely walk over what remains.
Be careful. In the garage. The car's in there somewhere. I won't go and have a look. Is it,
Do you film all that?
doesn't smell very good. Just getting up the back there. Yeah, the house has dropped about probably 2 meters here compared to the front.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But devastating there, Ursula.
Yep, it's
Yep.
devastating,
Oh,
right?
it's all come to life now.
It's like the rivers in the backyard.
Yeah.
And it is. The house leans so steeply, it's illogical. And inside...
Doesn't smell very nice in here. So, yeah. Yeah. It's just mud everywhere. Mud.
Is my washing machine still there?
Washing machine's there, but it's washing upside down.
It'll be detached.
Yeah. Kitchen. Where's your breakfast? Oh, your breakfast is still there?
Breakfast is still on the bench.
Oh yeah, come on, we can go and have breakfast.
Late this morning, our cameraman Bradley White and our reporter Zach Fleming went to Ursula's street, Rata Street. Thick mud still carpets the ground. Fences are raised in the air. Carports, garages, homes are broken. Many homes yellow or red stickered. The prognosis is grim. This afternoon, Economic Development Minister Simon Bridges got a first-hand look at the street and the house Ursula has called home for 45 years.
Excuse me, Minister. What do you think when you're looking at this?
Oh, it's incredibly sobering to see what's happened, literally how the land's opened up, the water's come in. I mean, you can just imagine what the homeowners of these places think when they see the devastation and see, their castle where they've, lived probably for a long time is in complete devastation. So it's incredibly sad and sobering.
Compared to what you're expecting, what is it?
Oh look, this actually looks worse. I think I've seen it from the air now, but to see this on the ground, I obviously expected the flooding, but what you see here is more than that. It's devastation of these homes. They're ripped up. These locations here have literally got a river coming through them. So it's a very sad, you just imagine what the owners are thinking.
And many of them are no-go zones at the moment, we can see on those houses right there.
Well, look, in these cases, literally, realistically, these houses are, that doesn't look like that's repairable, that's got to go. And it's going to be a very big job to get back to some sort of normality here for residents.
Simon Bridges speaking to Zach Fleming outside Ursula's home. Ursula is now staying with Tau and his wife in Whakatane. Her house appears to be a write-off. As you saw, treasures have been lost, some of them replaceable, some not. Photos, school stuff from the kids that Ursula kept because it was too lovely to part with. DVDs of her daughter marching at the Edinburgh tattoo, the stuff that matters in a family. Insurance assessors are on their way if they can get in, and she is fully insured, but after 45 years in the house that she and her husband built, she told me via Skype it seems a bit much to have to start again.
I have the offer of a flat in Whakatane that I can have, from the beginning of May. I'd prefer to do that and have time to think about what we're going to do, where I'm going to go, whether you're going to... I couldn't rebuild on that section.
No.
I don't particularly now want to go back. I've lived there all my life.
All your life?
I was born there. In Thornton.
Wow.
So.
And do you think other people in Edgecombe are feeling like that? Because
I'm sure.
You had 2004, now you've got 2017, more bad weather is coming. Are there people who are thinking, gosh, we love this place, but maybe we can't go back to it?
Yeah, I mean, the family have always said to me, "Oh, Mum, you need to shift into Whakatane and you need to sort of sell the house." I didn't really want to go. I wouldn't have gone. I'd have stayed, I'd have been there. But, yeah, now I just think probably Whakatane is the best place for me to go. And if I'm, if I've got accommodation, temporary accommodation, it'll give us time, or give me time to decide what I want to do, really.
Yes, so many people are in that position, aren't they? Trying to decide what to do, where to go, what their future is. And I know you've been really concerned about your entire community there.
Yeah, it's just, it's not just us. it's our neighbours. They're really bad. You know, at least we haven't got young children, you know, but there's other people on this, on our street, in College Road, you know, that have got young kids and,
Ursula has spent her life in Edgecombe, as you heard her say. She's lost her home of 45 years that she and her husband built, and we should say that Cyclone Cook is expected to make its first landfall directly on the mainland around the Bay of Plenty area at about this time tomorrow night. It's going to sweep down past Coromandel and Auckland, but maybe not directly hit either place, although the brush pass will be bad enough, but it is going to smash directly into the Bay of Plenty, having passed over Great Barrier 4 or 5 hours earlier. They've declared a state of emergency in Coromandel. We understand why. They're just in meetings trying to finalise the details. So we're going to go to Gary Towler, the Thames Valley Civil Defence Controller, live after the headlines, which we're taking early, Katrina, because we're waiting for Gary to join us and update us on that situation in Coromandel. So, actually on time for the first time in 15 months of Checks Point. Here is Katrina Batten with the 5:30 headlines at 5:30.
Weather forecasters say the storm approaching parts of the country will be the same size as 1968's Wahine storm, named after the ferry that sank outside Wellington Harbour. They say the Cyclone Cook-related storm will hit around 6 tomorrow night and needs to be taken seriously. Met Services' Georgina Griffiths has told Checkpoint the whole of the North Island and much of the South Island will be affected, and the storm will be accompanied by severe gales. A civil defence emergency was this afternoon declared for the Thames Coromandel district. The Mayor, Sandra Gowdy, says the expected heavy rain means people living in low coastal areas may need to be evacuated. Easter holiday makers have been warned to stay away from the Coromandel area. The entire rain-soaked Bay of Plenty is already under a state of emergency. Nelson police have confirmed human remains found in a car recovered from Nelson Harbour last week are those of the missing man, Leo Lip Neighbours. The 19-year-old went missing with his vehicle in January 2010, and Nelson police are now trying to find out how it ended up in the harbour. The High Court in Auckland has ruled that excessive defamation damages against Colin Craig constitute a miscarriage of justice. Last September, a jury found Mr Craig, the former Conservative Party leader, guilty of defaming the Taxpayers Union founder Jordan Williams. At the time, the jury awarded $1.27 million in damages, and now Justice Sarah Katz says the damages are well outside any reasonable range. Te Tai Tokoro MP Kelvin Davis says boosting the police presence in Northland has been a long time coming, especially in Kaitaia, where he says staff are struggling with the workload. The police have announced round-the-clock police bases in Kaitaia, Matamata, Wairoa and Rolleston. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. In the past hour, a state of emergency has been declared in Coromandel as it prepares for Cyclone Cook. Gary Towler, who is the Thames Valley Civil Defence Controller, joins us now. Gary, we have to stop meeting like this because you were with us a few times last month, right, as Coromandel took a pounding. What are you expecting over the next, say, 24, 36 hours?
John, we've declared an emergency because there's three main factors. One is the severity of the storm, and we've been advised that for those baby boomers, it's probably a bit like the Wahine storm, so we are preparing for that. The second thing is there's a possibility that Cyclone Cook may touch land or may get very, very close. So there's a whole lot of factors, including just heavy rain. There's going to be wind, and there's going to be a lot of issues. The other thing is we are very, very fragile on the Coromandel already. The ground is saturated. We've had over 100 slips in the last 2 weeks. Slips have started already. So what we are saying is that we're in no state to accommodate the holiday traffic. We're in no state to accommodate a lot of people coming on. So we've declared so we can try and manage that.
Yeah, and I think there's a real sense, and we saw this in Whanganui, of course, that people want to be told of the risk in advance, and there was a sense in Edgecombe that they weren't given enough notice, right? So no one can say you're not warning them. Let's go back to the flooding that you last joined us to discuss. There were slips, there were road closures, and that damage still exists, does it? And so there is a particular vulnerability in some areas.
Absolutely right. And the Rua Mahanga slip, which is on the Thames Coast Road that has been closed, that has caused the closure of the Thames Coast Road for the last 7 days, has come down again. So the road is closed. And it may or may not open tonight. So once again, anybody, not only the residents on the Coromandel Peninsula who are trying to get home, but anybody contemplating coming onto the peninsula, we're just advising don't come until at least Saturday, and only then, if you check all the current websites and listen to the media reports, because one is you're not going to get through, and two, if you get through, it's likely that you're going to be totally isolated for up to 2 or 3 days. So.
Okay, and these are very important words because, of course, it's Good Friday and it's also the beginning of the school holidays, right? So you would expect an inundation, bad choice of word, of Aucklanders really over the next few days, and you're saying don't come until you know the roads are open and the rain has stopped.
Absolutely. So this storm is due to hit us late tomorrow, so tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. That's the eye of the storm. Already we've got surface flooding throughout the Coromandel Peninsula, and as I said, you can't get up the western side of on the Thames Coast Road, and highly likely overnight you won't be able to get past Hekawai or towards Pauanui. So we're just advising people, mate, just take it easy, replan, and just wherever you are, if you're safe, stay there. Don't think about the Coromandel until at least Saturday morning.
Thanks, Gary. Just before you go, have you got the resources you need? A lot of volunteers doing good work around there, but in terms of logistics support, have you got what you need?
We are stretched because we are not on our own. The whole country's getting hammered, John.
Yeah.
We are, at the moment, we're fine, and we've brought staff in. We've also got the Defence Force are coming along tomorrow to help us out as well. So we're okay at the moment, but it is what it is, and we'll just have to do our best to get through it.
Thanks, Gary. Good luck. We really appreciate your time. Gary Taylor, who is the Thames Valley Civil Defence Coordinator and has spoken to us too often, really, because of the heavy rainfall they've had over the past month or so. Let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell. And Vodafone gets its hands on a rural internet business, Jonathan.
Evening, John. Yes. Well, shareholders in the small telecommunications company Team Talk overwhelmingly voted yes, 99.6%, to sell its rural business, internet business, Farmside to Vodafone. It will pay $10 million for that and has the option over the next 3 years of buying a remaining 30% stake for about $3 million. As part of this deal, Team Talk will continue to manage Farmside. Really, for Team Talk, though, it will use the money it's received, $10 million, to address its big debt mountain. It wants to use the proceeds to pay down that and look to resume to pay dividends probably next year. There were a number of shareholders at today's meeting in Wellington. They were questioning management about Team Talk's performance. Team Talk came back and said that a review is underway of the corporate governance structure, so we'll hear more from the company about that in the coming months. And Team Talk is also looking to take further costs out of the business, so those are some things that were addressed in the meeting today. One key feature, though, of today's decision to go with Vodafone is that you'll remember Spark had an offer on the table, 80 cents per share, $23 million for all of Team Talk. That's firmly off the table now that Vodafone's come to the party.
Jonathan, New Zealand oil and gas shareholders met today. ZOGs, as they were called when I was a kid. They met today. What were they discussing?
Well, another overwhelming majority there too, John. $100 million was voted to be approved to return back to shareholders. You'll remember New Zealand Oil and Gas has sold its Kupe and Tui stakes recently, so they now have no production in New Zealand. They have quite a big war chest of funds, though, and they're on the lookout for new assets.
Oh, nice position to be in. What happened on the markets today, Jonathan?
A top 50 index fell a handful of points, about 3 points today, to end at 7,252. The dollar trading in the same band as last night, 69.5 US cents, 92.7 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell, our business reporter from Wellington, thank you. 3 more former Sarah staffers are being investigated after allegations of conflicts of interest, prompting calls for an inquiry into the conduct of all staff at the agency responsible for the Canterbury rebuild. 2 former officials have passed on information about other possible cases after being referred to the Serious Fraud Office for misconduct. An investigation released yesterday found that officials Gerard Gallagher and Simon Nikoloff had a clear conflict of interest when arranging property deals through their company while working for Sarah. Looking at this has been our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet took over most of the responsibilities for the ongoing rebuild in Canterbury once Sarah was wound up. Its head, Andrew Kibblewhite, made the surprising revelation about further allegations at a hearing of Parliament's Finance and Expenditure Committee this morning.
We've had 3 names referred to us. We're investigating them to find if there's any substance, at which point we would then probably refer it back to the State Services Commission, much as we did with the 3 names that are already in the public domain.
And Andrew Kibblewhite revealed the new investigation is based on information passed on by the 2 men who've been referred to the SFO.
Mr Heron found that there wasn't systemic issues. He says, and some of the individuals who were found to have erred have said as part of their defence that this was going on elsewhere in the department. They've given us some specific instances of that, and we're looking at that.
The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says none of this should come as a surprise.
Well, the Americans warned us well before we got underway with Sarah and after the earthquake that the biggest thing to look forward would be fraud and malpractice. And we got all those warnings, and it seems that we've ignored it.
Labour spokesperson for Canterbury Issues, Megan Woods, says investigating the 3 new cases is not enough, and she wants a full-scale inquiry. In Parliament, she asked Jerry Brownlee, the minister responsible for post-quake Canterbury, for assurances if he was not prepared to launch a wider inquiry.
That these individuals, now 6 in total, are the only Sarah and or Otakaro employees that may have engaged in activities that may constitute conflict of interest or fraud. If not, why not?
Well, Mr Speaker, given the many mays that were in that question, I'd have to say it borders on the hypothetical. The reality is there are investigations taking place because 2 gentlemen now referred to the Serious Fraud Office in the latter stages of the investigation they were under spun round and pointed the finger at others. They will be investigating.
Andrew Kibblewhite would not go into any further details about the allegations or say when the 3 people under investigation left Sarah, but he said they do not work for Otakaro, the Crown company responsible for key precinct projects in Christchurch and for Crown property assets. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
19 minutes to 6. The Northland town of Kaitaia will get a 24/7 police station during the next year. But Kaikohe or Kerikeri will have to wait another year. The police announced the first 20 police stations to get around-the-clock presence will be in Kaitaia, Matamata Wairoa, which is between Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, of course, and Rolleston. The other 16 stations will be rolled out by 2021 as part of a $388 million boost to put 880 more police officers on the beat around the country. What's it all mean? Laura Tupou has a look at it.
The head of a Māori trust in Northland is disappointed there'll be an increase in police numbers instead of boosting local warden numbers. The chief executive of He Korowai Trust, Ricky Horton, says having more police on the ground won't solve the current problems.
Disappointed that it hasn't come to the community in the first instance. We know what we need to do. We know how to grapple with it. But what will happen, I suspect, is that there'll be more arrests. It's not really going to solve the problem. It's just going to shift the problem onto the judiciary, then onto the prisons, and then onto the other ministries.
He says it would have been better if they had used Māori wardens and the Māori Women's Welfare League.
I'm sort of disappointed that somehow or other their mighty support and knowledge and skill has been left out of any allocation.
But Te Tai Tokero MP Calvin Davis says boosting police numbers in Northland has been a long time coming, especially in Kaitaia where staff are struggling with the workload. But he says he'd also like to see some education programs rolled out and for police to be on the beat in the streets mixing with the community.
I don't just want them to come in there and just start locking up more and more people. We've got to have a different approach to combating crime. We've got to be smarter on crime rather than being harder on crime. We know that we're throwing more and more people into prisons and that's not working for us. So we've got to just be more smart when it comes to law and order.
Calvin Davis says there's also a huge need in Kaikohe where a 24/7 police presence should have been introduced before now, not in 2018, and that's if it doesn't go to Kerikeri instead. The chair of the Kaikohe Business Association, Mark Anderson, says he's also disappointed about the wait.
Glad at least one of the two towns in New Zealand that have a very high need for a 24-hour manned police station, at least one of those towns is getting it. We would dearly love Kaikohe to be the other one, but certainly don't resent Kaitaia being first cab off the rank.
While Kaikohe waits, Kaitaia will get an extra 5 officers in order to establish its 24/7 operation. The Police Commissioner Mike Bush says at the moment officers who finish in the early hours of the morning in Kaitaia are required to be on call if anything happens. But that will soon change.
So police officers will be working in that area, out of a base but not in a base, patrolling, being visible and being absolutely ready to respond to their community.
Mike Bush says as part of today's announcement, the Northland region will get 66 more officers. He says across the country there'll be an extra 880 sworn officers and 245 non-sworn staff employed over the next 4 years, with recruitment starting in July. Mo te hotaka o te ata, ko Laura Tupou aho.
The High Court in Auckland has ruled that excessive defamation damages against Colin Craig constitute a miscarriage of justice. Remember, last September, a jury found the former Conservative Party leader guilty of defaming the Taxpayers Union founder Jordan Williams. The jury awarded $1.27 million in damages, the highest ever amount in a New Zealand defamation case. In reviewing the case, Justice Sarah Katz says the damages are well outside any reasonable range. She says there will either have to be a retrial or the parties could agree to accept a new damages award. Bridget Burke, our producer, spoke to Colin Craig a short time ago.
The judgment has come out. The judgment basically says it will have to be a retrial. And I think that's right, because the jury did get it wrong, and that's the clear finding of the judges, that the jury just did get it wrong. And so we'll have another trial to hopefully get it right next time round.
And we're talking about the much publicised trial of last year, including testimony from Rachel McGregor.
Correct.
Salacious inclusions of poems and details about relationships, allegations made about the properness of...
Correct. That is the trial, and I think a lot of people did get the impression, it was all done and dusted and decided, but in fact it wasn't. The matter has been under consideration for many months, and with the final judgment coming out today, one that I think is absolutely bang on point. Obviously, Mr. Williams can appeal, because any decision from a court can be appealed, but that's a matter for Mr. Williams to decide. I think the judgment is absolutely on point.
So you've not paid any monies as a result of the finding last year to Mr. Williams?
No, because it simply wasn't the decision of the court. Yes, some jurors thought that was what it should be, but the fact of the matter is the court has overruled that jury and said, no, that's not right. So no, there's no award, there's no judgment against me and no award against me. And obviously I'm very happy with that, because I think that is the right outcome.
What needs to happen to bring this back to trial, Mr. Craig?
Well, that's up to Mr. Williams. I'm comfortable that it's the ball's back in his court. He now has to decide whether he wants to have another go, and he's welcome to do that. I, of course, will defend myself. And I think what has happened in this process is we now know for certain some things. We know that he did attack me, that he had an agenda, he did attack me, and that he said things about me that were not right. And that's been clearly decided by the court, put into the judgments, and I'm very happy that we're going down the right track of establishing what actually did happen.
You've got more defamation cases ahead of you?
I do. Obviously had a success in my case against Mr. John Stringer in the Christchurch High Court earlier this year, so that's very positive news as well. And then the third proceeding, which is one involving Mr. Slater, goes to court in the Auckland High Court next month. That case will involve arguments both ways as to whether the things that he has said publicly and I have said publicly are defamatory or whether or not they're appropriate.
Why do you think the court found in your favour today?
Well, I mean, technically you could say it didn't find in my favour. It essentially ruled it a draw. I think what it came down to, and it's pretty clear in the ruling, is that the fact of the matter is Mr. Williams did launch an attack against my character. He did say things about me that were not true, and I responded to that. And I think the jury failed to pick up on that. And that's reflected, I think, in their view of how it should have come down in terms of a judgment against me. The court just simply hasn't agreed with them. If Mr. Williams wishes to sue me, he's going to have to take it back to court again.
And your marriage has endured these challenges and attacks on your character?
Look, it has. It's not always easy. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on, particularly during long court cases. My wife's had to be a witness in court cases. And that, these are always challenging, especially when you've got a family. But no, we're going along very well, and we sort of support each other, I think, and what happens in a good marriage anyway.
Colin Craig talking to Bridget Burke a very short time ago. Checkpoint has yet to hear back from Jordan Williams, but in a statement earlier this afternoon, he said he and his lawyer would make a decision about what they were going to do over the coming days. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer has made a televised apology for a baffling series of gaffes, that's a nice word, in which he favourably compared Adolf Hitler to Syrian President Assad. Before a dumbstruck White House press corps, Mr Spicer calmly stated that even the Nazi leader had not used chemicals against his own people. His comments led to a barrage of criticism, as the BBC's John Sopel reports.
The President's spokesman, Sean Spicer, came to the daily briefing determined to talk about the seriousness of last week's sarin attack in Syria, which the administration holds Bashar al-Assad responsible for. But then he drew on history to make this point.
We didn't use chemical weapons in World War II. You had someone as despicable as Hitler, who didn't even sink to using chemical weapons.
But that statement drew an incredulous response from journalists attending the briefing.
I just want to give you the opportunity to clarify something you said that seems to be gaining some traction right now. Quote, Hitler didn't even sink to the level of using chemical weapons. What did you mean by that?
I think when you come to sarin gas, he was not using the gas on his own people the same way that Assad is doing.
Millions of German Jews were gassed during the Second World War in the network of concentration camps built in what was called the final solution. The director of the Anne Frank Centre condemned the President's spokesman's remarks. Sean Spicer has engaged in Holocaust denial, the most offensive form of fake news imaginable, by denying Hitler gassed millions of Jews to death. Spicer's statement is the most evil slur upon a group of people we've ever heard from a White House press secretary. And on Capitol Hill too, criticism from senators, congressmen and women, both Republican and Democrat, disturbed at what they've heard. Last night, President Trump put out a tweet wishing Jews here in America and around the world a happy Passover. Today, his press spokesman will have caused offence to many of those people with these comments. Mr Spicer has since put out a clarification saying, in no way was I trying to lessen the horrendous nature of the Holocaust.
I was obviously trying to make a point about the heinous acts that Assad had made against his own people last week, using chemical weapons and gas. And frankly, I mistakenly used an inappropriate and insensitive reference to the Holocaust, for which, frankly, there is no comparison. And for that, I apologize. It was a mistake to do that.
White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer ending that report from John Sopel. You wouldn't think United could make life any worse for itself right now. Its CEO has been forced to apologise and pledge a full review into an incident where, a passenger was forcibly removed, bloodied and screaming from a flight. Amid growing outrage over the shocking footage of David Dow being dragged over the aisle by security staff so his seat could be given to a crew member, more stories are emerging of the way in which the airline threatens to remove passengers when it's overbooked. And it's not just in cattle class. United Airlines appears to be an equal opportunities bully. According to 59-year-old Jeff Ferns, he was a United passenger last week.
Bought the ticket. It was a full fare first-class ticket. Checked in online the day before, arrived at the gate about an hour before boarding, boarded, with first-class passengers, and about 15 minutes after boarding, a gate agent came and asked me if I was Jeff Ferns. I said I was, and she said, "You'll have to deplane immediately." And I said, "Well, wait a minute, why?" And she indicated that they'd oversold first class, they'd had a change in equipment, and so there were fewer seats, and that I had to leave. And I said, well, wait a minute, I'm already on board the plane. I paid full freight. I'm not an upgrade. This is not a mileage ticket or anything of that nature. I paid full fare. And she said, well, we have a priority list, and regrettably, you're at the bottom of it, and you'll have to deplane so we can seat someone else. And I said, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. I'm already on board the plane. If somebody else came late, why are you ousting me from my seat in order to give them a seat? And she said, that's just the way it works. We have the right to prioritize our clients, our customers, and you'll have to leave. And I said, I don't think you have that right. And she said, no, we do. And I said, well, that doesn't sound right to me. So she exited the aircraft, and 5 minutes later came back and said, nope, you have to deplane, and you have to deplane right now. And I said, I'm not voluntarily giving up my seat. And she said, if you don't leave the airplane right now and come into the gate area, we'll have security come and escort you off. And so the guy who was sitting next to me, apparently a long time, frequent flyer with United, said, look, these guys get really nasty. I've seen this happen before. I wish I'd gotten his name, but you should just go do it. And I said, well, at 59 years old, I'm not going to wrestle around, in the cabin of an aircraft. And so walked off. They proceeded to give my seat to another first-class passenger that apparently had higher priority or higher status, and was told, but good news, Mr. Ferns, we can reaccommodate you by putting you in the last middle seat we have available in the back of the aircraft.
Now, sorry, Jeff, can I cut in here?
Of course, I'm sorry.
So you were threatened with physical removal. If you didn't go, someone was going to come and take you off.
That is absolutely correct.
And the whole process sounds so completely lacking in charm or gratitude. I mean, we often talk about entitlement. The entitlement sounds like it was all United's, that they were entitled to remove you, that they were entitled to do it as charmlessly as possible. What was the person's tone or manner as she was trying to get you off the plane?
Very peremptory. I mean, it was initially, this is the way it is, and you need to comply. And when I was not complying, it became very strident. It was, this will happen or we'll make it happen. And, interestingly enough, I will tell you, the flight crew, once the aircraft got underway, 3 members of the flight crew came up to me, and all of them apologized to me and said that we saw what happened. You shouldn't have been treated that way. That was incredibly high-handed. That's not right. And we're sorry, and if anything you want, food, drink, just let us know. It's on us, which I thought was very gracious of them. But they also made it clear that they had no control over this process, that it was the gate agent, and that, indeed, it's not even the gate agent. They have a priority list that apparently comes from someplace. How it is compiled, it wasn't made transparent. But they were just apologetic. But at the time, the gate agent, the person responsible for sort of ousting me, made it very clear that this was going to be her way, and there was no attempt to explain, no offer of compensation, no request for volunteers, nothing.
And there was a sense, both from her manner and from the man who was sitting next to you who said, I've seen this before, that this was almost kind of pro forma stuff, that this was reasonably routine, regular and common.
Yeah, I certainly got the impression that this was not a one-off event.
And so when you saw the video of this poor fellow actually physically being dragged out, which may have happened to you if you'd not gone, did you just think, wow, this is how my story would have finished?
Fairly shocking. In fact, my wife even indicated you should have just held out a little longer and you could have gotten on TV. So,
I don't know about getting on TV on those terms.
Yeah, no kidding, not on those terms.
Not on those terms.
I mean, that in fact is what prompted me reaching out to the LA Times, just to say I had an eerily similar experience, albeit it wasn't one that ended up in my physical removal, because at the end I relented, but it was exactly the same mannerisms, the same intonation of our way or the highway.
Now, your story has an eccentric ending, and that is that you got to fly. They said there is a seat available down the back. You'd paid for a first-class seat, but they gave you a seat. But it was a middle seat, and that's a crucial detail, because who were you between?
Well, it was a very, actually, and I don't want to, they were nice enough, but they were having a bit of a colloquy back and forth. So, it was not really possible for us to, or for me to sort of do anything productive on the flight.
So wait a second, you were seated between a couple who were having some discord, to put it politely.
Let's just say they were having a discussion. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here.
So sorry to laugh, because it's disgraceful. But when you hear the phrase, fly the friendly skies, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think they get points, for the misnomer there. It's clearly an oxymoron. That is not the friendly skies by any stretch of the imagination.
Jeff Ferns, a more than 50-year-old copper time capsule unearthed during demolition work on the Bowen State Building in Wellington has been cracked open. Our political reporter Craig McCulloch was there.
The hard hats and fluoro vests are out, as if campaign season's come early. And Maggie Barry, Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage, is in full swing.
This is intriguing. What could possibly be in this?
With reporters crowding round and officials standing by, the moment arrives. The grand opening.
I can't believe there's a cigarette advertisement here. Okay, so that really is a sign of the times. It's not something you do these days.
Inside, a magazine clipping and photos of the high-rise in construction. Also, a small package, helpfully labelled coins.
All right, there we go. So we have decimal currency, pennies. Oh, I remember that. Does anyone remember the 20-cent coin?
From deep in the casing, the minister manages to unwedge a copy of the Evening Standard, dated July 1959.
Oh yes, here we go. 2 dogs and a rabbit into space and back. Russia sends up a big rocket.
Also inside, a stack of building plans with specifications for its construction.
Whoa, oh, it's top secret. There we go, departmental. Oh yes, it is top secret actually.
Russell Mulder is one of the contractors who was on site when the capsule was unearthed.
It's not every day that you find a time capsule. Generally you've found Coke bottles and silver spoons. So we're pretty excited to find it and see what might be in it. We all had our guesses, but we didn't really know.
The items will now be inspected by Te Papa Museum for any greater significance. They may in fact be returned to their original site, along with a new 2017 time capsule for future finders to fawn over. For Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Quick email, I'm going to read it fast. John, National Civil Defence is very quiet in the face of the storm and in the last storm. Why the change? Where is Minister Jerry Brownlee? What's going on? Thanks, Matt.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. Met Service says it hasn't seen a storm like Cyclone Cook since the one in 1968 that sank the ferry Wahine, killing 52 people. A Met Service spokeswoman, Lisa Murray, says the public aren't taking the approaching storm seriously enough. Eva Corlett reports.
Deep, tightly packed low. The isobars are really tight. Going to see some really strong winds. We could see gusts of up to 150 kilometres per hour or even more for some exposed places. We're expecting more rainfall accumulations meeting warning criteria, and that's on top of the rain that's already fallen for some of these regions.
The Thames Coromandel District Mayor says she's declared a civil defence emergency over fears of blocked roads and residents having to be evacuated over the next 2 days. Sandra Gowdy says the district is still recovering from the remnants of Cyclone Debbie last week, with only one lane of State Highway 25 in Ruamahanga Bay open. She says the Transport Agency has warned about 2,000 cubic metres of rock and soil above the highway could still come down. Ms Gowdy says the civil defence emergency means the Coromandel area will have the support it needs as Cyclone Cook makes landfall tomorrow. Sandra Gowdy is warning any holidaymakers to stay away from the Coromandel area until at least Saturday or potentially face closed roads and being cut off. The Fire Service says it's had 44 call-outs to flooded properties in the Auckland region after today's downpour. The shift manager, Jaron Phillips, says calls are still coming in, mostly from Te Aroha and Matamata, with crews sandbagging basements. Mr Phillips says the North Shore, West Auckland and Papakura were the worst affected earlier today. And authorities are warning torrential rain could cut off the eastern Bay of Plenty in the next 2 days. The entire Bay of Plenty is under a state of emergency as the approaching storm threatens the rain-soaked region. The High Court in Auckland has ruled that excessive defamation damages against Colin Craig constitute a miscarriage of justice. The damages awarded against the former Conservative Party leader last year were the largest in New Zealand's history. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie. A tourism operator who claims the opposition leader, Andrew Little, defamed him intends continuing his legal battle. Earlier this week, a High Court jury in Wellington cleared the Labour leader of defaming the part owner of Scenic Hotel Group, Lani Hageman. However, it could only come to a full verdict on one of 6 causes of action involving her husband, Earl Hageman. The jury also found Andrew Little had defamed Mr Hageman on one occasion, but couldn't agree whether he had qualified privilege at at the time. In a statement released this afternoon, Lani Hageman says her legal advice is that Mr Little was not entitled to claim qualified privilege. She says while her husband is still alive, every effort should be made to bring his claims to completion, and she intends to do so. The police have confirmed human remains found in a submerged car in Nelson Harbour are those of the missing teenager Leo Lip-Neighbours. The wrecked car was retrieved by a police dive team last week. At the time, the police said they were confident the vehicle belonged to Leo Lip-Neighbours, who had been missing for 7 years. The 19-year-old was last seen driving away from his flat in January 2010 in his Toyota Corolla station wagon. Today, the police said a forensic pathology team in Christchurch has identified the human remains found in the car as Mr Lip-Neighbours. They say they're still investigating how the vehicle came to be in the harbour. It's 6:04. To sport, and the All Blacks captain Kieran Reid will make his return to Super Rugby on Friday night for the Crusaders against the Japan Sunwolves. Reid missed the first 6 weeks of the season with a wrist injury, though he played a club match in Christchurch last weekend. Also returning from injury are first five Richie Mo'onga, winger Seta Tumanavalu and midfielder Jack Goodhue. Crusaders prop Wyatt Crockett will become the most capped Super Rugby player of all time when he runs out for the 176th time, surpassing former Blues hooker Kevin Mialamu's record. The Warriors are preparing themselves for their toughest challenge of the National Rugby League season. The side fly to Canberra tomorrow to face Premiership contenders, the Canberra Raiders, on Saturday. Warriors back rower Ryan Hoffman says the side's gaining confidence following 2 wins on the trot, but knows the Raiders pose a whole new threat in Canberra.
They're trying to create a really intimidating place to play, and I think it certainly is one of the toughest places to go in rugby league, so it's a great opportunity for us this week, and it's a challenge we're looking forward to.
Ryan Hoffman. Domestics netball's first Auckland derby starts tonight when the Northern Mystics and Northern Stars face each other for the first time. It's the South Auckland-based Stars' first year in the competition, but already ahead of the Mystics on the Premiership ladder after recording a win over the Mainland Tactics last week. Tip-off is at 7:40. That's the news.
Just apologise.
Media of the United States has gone crazy. It's just all day has been just hammering United and saying, why doesn't the guy apologise? Why doesn't the head of United apologise? Now he finally does. So it's way too little too late.
We'll have to say sorry.
We didn't use chemical weapons in World War II. You had someone as despicable as Hitler who didn't even sink to using chemical weapons.
Unravelling the spin. Ryan Espiner and Susie Ferguson. Morning Report weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the high stakes of the top-level meetings of the US Secretary of State in Moscow. And after 10, international economic expert James Rickards on too big to fail and what will happen during the next global financial crisis. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Severe weather warnings and watches are in force, including damaging winds and significant rainfall over northern and central New Zealand. Northern to Taranaki, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty in the central high country, periods of rain with heavy falls, localised downpours and possible thunderstorms. Severe gales for a time tomorrow afternoon or evening. Gisborne to Wairarapa, occasional rain, heavy tomorrow, especially about the ranges with possible severe gales. Whanganui to Wellington, periods of rain, heavy at times, severe gales late tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, periods of rain with heavy falls, localised downpours and possible thunderstorms, easing for a time later until early tomorrow. Westland and Canterbury, occasional rain with some heavy falls possible for a time. Otago and Southland, rain with heavy falls, easing for a time, easing tomorrow afternoon, and Fiordland, scattered rain. Checkpoint.
It is Checkpoint?
It is Checkpoint, but the Chatham Islands, more importantly, occasional rain. It's 6:07, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you. On the Chatham Islands, I'm sure A warm hello.
Hopefully, of course.
A warm hello to everyone listening to the Chatham Islands, to Check One on Chatham Islands. A state of emergency, as Katrina was just saying. The weather has caused a declaration of it across the Bay of Plenty and in the past 2 hours across the Coromandel as residents prepare for the worst storm in more than 40 years. Now, this is in terms of broad brush impact. Cyclone Cook will hit Great Barrier Island at about lunchtime tomorrow, then track down beside Coromandel, possibly not directly hitting it. It will make landfall, they think, on the mainland for the first time in the Western Bay of Plenty, almost exactly 24 hours from now. These areas will see strong winds, very heavy rain, tidal surges. From there she'll head south, passing close to Wellington overnight, then heading Banks Peninsula on Friday morning. Auckland in for torrential rain and strong winds. Mid-service forecaster Georgina Griffith says the situation is extremely serious.
We're putting gusts to 140 kilometres an hour in for Auckland. And again, that will impact on airports. That's a damaging gust from an airplane point of view. And whilst it is only a short period of severe gales for Auckland, it happens when people are going to try and go away for Easter. The landslips, of course, and the travel plans for people trying to go away tomorrow, you're going to have to check in with the roads, your transportation links. Really carefully plan about whether you even want to go away until things are settled down, because we will see landslips, we will see roads gone, we will see flash flooding at some point in the next 48 hours in the Upper North Island. All those hotspots, those holiday places like Coromandel and parts of North Auckland, also Bay of Plenty, where people do travel to, the Waikato. So again, wind and rain in that Upper North Island area, probably going to impact on people's travel plans. So just check in with the Met Service forecast, check in with NZTA around roading, check in with Civil Defence if you live in the Bay of Plenty, because they're already on state of emergency.
Georgina Griffiths. Meanwhile, the Economic Development Minister Simon Bridges visited Edgecombe today to survey the damage from last week's floods and meet business owners. He said there would be an announcement from the government about financial support package, but not until Cyclone Cook has passed.
There is a bit of worry around the weather, and that's because if you think about it, it's a double whammy. They've had it. That has meant some slips, some erosion on the roads, but they're in a sense at a saturation point, and a lot more bad weather on them just makes that situation so much worse, potentially depending on the nature of that. Of course, it also means in terms of the residences and the businesses, what has been bad becomes worse in that regard as well. I know there's a lot of work being done though, to get ourselves in the best shape for that, but to some extent we just got to wait and see what Mother Nature throws us.
Speaking in Whakatane earlier today, that Simon Bridges, suddenly what were rare and even freakish events are becoming repetitive. So, does this weather resemble the modelling projections for climate change? Lots of you have been asking us this, and the answer, it seems, is yes. In June 2015, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment found that climate change is the most serious environmental issue facing New Zealand by far, and by far is a quote. The Commissioner's 2015 report contains maps of very low-lying coastal areas, and that Edgecombe coastline is amongst them. So I asked Dr. Jan Wright what we've learnt from the flooding of the past week.
Well, two things here really, John. That report was about the rising sea, which is one effect of climate change. The problem in Edgecombe, of course, is river flooding rather than sea flooding, although you can see from that map that there's a lot of very low-lying area around Edgecombe. But again, the increased river flooding is something we will expect with climate change, because 1 degree rise in temperature of the atmosphere means 7% more water in it. So the atmosphere's will have more and more energy in it and more water in it, and that means more intense storms, more intense rainfall, I'm afraid.
So what do we do? Because there are communities that love where they are proud to be there, don't want to leave, but there is an increasing sense that actually the kind of flooding we've seen in Edgecombe, the kind of events that we're seeing in communities like South Dunedin and coastal communities in many parts of New Zealand will become more common.
That's right, but it will take some time, and I don't know how long it'll be before, can't say Edgecombe will necessarily be flooded again for a long time once they prepare those stock banks. But it's basically a general trend, and so we need to be thinking about, if we're going to build a whole new town or suburb somewhere, it needs to be a couple of metres at least above the spring high tide mark now, because you don't want to be building somewhere where all the infrastructure is going to, so expensive. You expect it to be there for a couple of 100 years at least. And so we do need to rethink it, because the world is changing. And the talking about this Edgecombe event as a 1 in 500 year event is really not appropriate anymore, because things are changing. So what is a 1 in 500 year event will become a 1 in 100 year event, then a 1 in 50 year event, and so on. So it's the wrong language. We need to say, a 1% chance of a flood of this kind, and then it becomes a 2%, then it becomes a 3%. So we've got to reconfigure the way we think about all of this, and reconfigure how we think about planning.
These are big conversations, aren't they? Because whilst we can do forward planning to prevent building on vulnerable, low-lying or prone areas,
yes,
the communities that are already there, what do we do?
I know, and I feel very much for them. I mean, this terrible tragedy for Edgecombe, and the people in South Dunedin too, very low-lying. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. That's the short answer. We need to think. Eventually, we'll have to think in some places about what's called managed retreat, but who is to manage that and where they retreat to are all questions that we need to start thinking about. In the meantime, yes, stop banks will be repaired, insurance money will be paid out, and so on. But we can't go on indefinitely like that as the problem gets bigger.
This is a strong piece of work that you did in 2015. Full of pretty explicit recommendations. Was there political buy-in? Is there political buy-in? Is there political will to address things which are still, setting aside South Dunedin and Edgecombe, largely abstractions and hypothetical?
Well, I think, let me think, how can I respond to that one, John? The recommendations were all to central government, and central government is relying very heavily on councils here. And they give advice to councils, give guidance to council, but it doesn't have the force of law. And I do think these are problems that are too big for some councils at least to start to grapple with. And so I want to see more central government involvement, more central government assistance. Very, very difficult for a local council to deal with these issues. I mean, I'm quite an admirer of the Mayor of Dunedin, actually, because I think he's fronting up very well to this and being very balanced in the way he's responding. So, but it is very hard for everybody, and particularly hard for the people who live in those areas.
Dr. Jan Wright, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, this really is a fascinating and important subject. 6:15. New research shows the government could save $11 million over 15 years if it moves 1,000 people from social housing into their own home. The Housing Foundation says that's because the taxpayer would end up paying less for their healthcare, welfare and accommodation supplements. The charitable trust believes that would be a win-win for the government and the low-income families that would get homes. Edward O'Driscoll reports.
The Housing Foundation looked at 2 international studies and put them into a New Zealand perspective, as well as combining data from a South Auckland community. Melissa Atama, who lives in that community, has spent 13 years moving around rentals, but she, her partner and young family recently moved into a new home under the Affordable Rental Program, which helps families to buy their own house. She says it has drastically improved their quality of life.
So it's putting those roots down, and it's very stable, and my family is stable, and the kids aren't as sick, as they were in the rentals they may have been in. And just that security, knowing no one's going to come along and boot you out. And the one thing it does is it enables and empowers you to do the things you really want to do with your life.
Melissa Atama says she wouldn't have been able to buy a house without access to an affordable housing scheme.
It just actually makes it happen. It's so unreachable, especially in Auckland, these days. And I just think it's the only way you're going to get people that are really hard workers who are still struggling to make ends meet actually have the opportunity to make that dream a reality and own their own homes.
The Housing Foundation's Manager of Strategy and Development, Paul Gilbert, says no research of this kind had been done before in New Zealand. He says it clearly shows helping low-income people into home ownership had broad benefits.
The research is asking, is it a good idea to move people out of welfare dependence and towards independence and perhaps home ownership? And resoundingly, the answer is yes, that is a good idea. So the cost to the state as people move along the continuum in that direction reduces significantly by millions.
Paul Gilbert says the research presents a compelling case for the government to invest more into affordable housing.
The system at the moment, the housing continuum, is broken, and where it's particularly broken in terms of allowing people to pull out of welfare dependence and move towards independence is in the affordable housing space. And unless we can unblock that blockage, we're going to see more homelessness.
Scott Figgenshow, the Chief Executive of Community Housing Aotearoa, which represents community housing providers, says this research should make policymakers act.
It really helps confirm that security of tenure is something that's essential for family well-being. So we can't see why this just doesn't prove the point, and let's crack on making both security of tenure something that is part of our rental market, as well as those pathways to home ownership.
The Social Housing Minister, Amy Adams, says the research findings are too simplistic.
You have to look at all of the factors and reasons that are in social housing, and those are many and complex, and they do tend to be higher users of government services. But as I said, it's not a straight extrapolation that if we took those very people and put them into home ownership without any other intervention, it's a simple calculation.
The Minister says while the research doesn't raise anything new, it does highlight some interesting points. For Checkpoint, Edward O'Driscoll.
Mark Stephen was trying to escape a drunken argument with his partner when he hopped into his car. Delia Grace Williams chased after him in a bid to stop him from driving drunk. In his stupor, he ran over her, taking her life. That was in March last year. Today in the High Court in Wellington, Stevens was sentenced to 3 years in prison for her death. Our reporter Michael Kropp was there.
Byron Williams McLean is Ms. Williams' only child. His victim impact statement was punctuated by tears.
I can vividly recall my mother lying in state in Wellington Hospital's morgue, a cold, bruised and damaged empty shell of the warm, vibrant and loving woman that she was. It hurts me still to know that she died in such a horrific way.
Ms. Williams was one of 7 children. Her mother, Shirley, says they spoke daily.
I have very much missed her calls and hearing her voice. She has left a huge gap in my life and I miss her. I miss her calling out Mum on alighting from the car. She was a ball of energy and in spite of everything, loved everybody and had empathy for others.
Maria Royal still has an answer phone message from her zany, piano-playing younger sister that she can't bear to delete.
This message on the electronic call minder both haunts me as well as brings tears to my eyes and pain in my heart every time I have to reselect it to save it from expiring and be deleted.
Mrs. Royal spoke of Ms. Williams' tumultuous, violent relationship with Stevens. The court was told the police were called to the couple's house 10 times over the years and that he was convicted of assaulting her in 2010. It also heard that this would be Stevens' 6th drink-driving conviction. He had originally been charged with murder, but last month he pleaded guilty to manslaughter and to driving with excess breath alcohol. His lawyer, Judith Ablett-Kerr QC, says Stevens feels deep and genuine remorse for his actions.
The defence is adamant that he did not know that she was on the ground in a situation of danger. Indeed, if he did, we probably wouldn't be here today dealing with this.
Justice Simon France says on the day of Ms. Williams' death, the pair had been drinking. After dinner, they began arguing and Stevens decided to leave. She followed him as he reversed up the drive in a bid to stop him from driving drunk. Ms. Williams grabbed the driver's door and, after a struggle, she fell on the road near the right front tyre. Justice France says Stevens then moved forward, slowly running her over.
You did not intend to hit Ms. Williams with the car. I accept that when you drove off you didn't realise you had done so. But second, the risk of hitting her should have been obvious to you. You knew she had fallen and took no care about where she was. The fact that you didn't realise the bump that you admit you felt was her just serves to illustrate the high level of carelessness that makes this unintended death an offence of manslaughter.
Justice France sentenced Stevens to 3 years in prison, and once he's released he'll be disqualified from driving for 4 years. In Wellington for Checkpoint, call Michael Kropp there, Nay.
22 minutes past 6 exactly now. All major parties in Parliament were on hand to receive a petition calling for an investigation into the health and societal harms of pornography today. The petition, led by Family First Director Bob McCroskey, was signed by 22,000 people in 2 months. Here's our political reporter, May Heron.
Bob McCroskey isn't calling for porn to be banned, but he says more research is needed to understand the impact of pornography.
It's the same as we've acknowledged that there's an obesity epidemic, and we're not against food, but we do need to acknowledge when something becomes harmful. And I think yesterday's pornography is now mainstream media. Today's pornography is far more explicit, and it's also aggressive, and that's what people are concerned about.
Bob McCroskey wants an expert panel made up of neurologists, biologists, counsellors, psychotherapists, researchers, youth workers and teachers to investigate and then make policy recommendations to Parliament.
I mean, what expectation are we putting on, for example, the internet providers to actually protect young people? And so one of the things they may look at is the opt-out, opt-in prospect, where by default porn is blocked unless you actually specifically opt in to look at it.
Mangere MP, Labour's William Seo, received the petition. He says any panel's findings could be helpful in other areas of lawmaking.
The view is that if we're going to tackle sexual violence meaningfully and address it with the aim of eliminating it, then we do need to have the evidence before us about the link between porn and sexual violence.
National MP Chester Burrows says many people in government think an inquiry into porn is a good start. He says the law hasn't kept pace with technology, causing concern, particularly among parents.
We're not talking about a couple of well-read playboys tucked under the kid's bed now. We're talking about people who have been able to look at pornography animated on their own personal telephones and computers, which can't be monitored.
But the Justice Minister, Amy Adams, says regulating porn is a complicated issue.
There are some very degrading and dehumanising examples of pornography that deals with violence against women and some pretty awful conduct. That's fairly repugnant, but at the same time we have a society that is subject to our criminal law settings, are pretty tolerant of free expression, and we have to walk those lines very carefully.
The petition now goes to a select committee for consideration. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
6:24. Heavy old program tonight, and some heavy old weather on the way. Do take care. Hitting Great Barrier from about 1 o'clock tomorrow, and hitting the North Island around Coromandel and the Bay of Plenty about this time tomorrow night, maybe an hour or so earlier. So let's end with some human kindness. Entertainers Howard Morrison Jr. and Russell Harrison were so moved by images of the Edgecombe flooding that they were motivated to help. This morning, the singers, comedians and keen hunters arrived at the Kokohindo Marae in Te Teko, where a large group of volunteers gathered to deal to about 50 donated animal carcasses. They lined up at benches with their aprons and knives and set about preparing and packing meat parcels for the families who are homeless and those who are housing evacuees. Our reporter Mihi Narangi Forbes spoke to Howard and Russell.
Even though we're calling it Kaiwaka, it's for the people who are housing those families. You know, in one instance in the Ohope, I've heard that there are 19 adults underneath one roof, and there's a lot of pressure on things like power and the everyday needs like toilet paper, diapers for kids, and kai.
And freezers.
And freezers, yeah. Well, a lot of them have had their dosage of canned food, and it's just an opportunity where we can put some meat together for them.
And so you're also bringing the added value of a waiata while the boys cut.
Yeah.
We want to try and share some music, you know, to keep the energy up and keep everybody optimistic. This isn't like a perfected science about what we're doing today. We don't know when the kai is going to come in and what it's going to look like, so we'll just kind of... We have to stay upbeat and positive about what's going to happen, and I think hearing Howard's dulcet tones, you know, your lovely voice, that'll keep everybody inspired.
Can we hear it?
I bless the day I found you. I want to stay around you, and so I beg you, let it be me. Don't ever leave me lonely.
love. Without your sweet, sweet love.
The singing at the marae as they were cutting up the kai. Human kindness in the Western Bay of Plenty. Just a reminder. States of emergency declared in the Bay of Plenty and in Coromandel. Do be careful if you are in those areas. Cyclone Cook is expected to hit about this time tomorrow night, passing over Great Barrier at 1 p.m. We had the Civil Defence on from Coromandel before, and they said, look, we have had heavy flooding last month. We are very vulnerable. If the weather hits in anywhere near the levels of wetness that are predicted in the next 24 to 36 hours, please don't come here until the rain has stopped and you have heard the roads are open. Don't forget, of course, it is Good Friday and the beginning of the school holidays, and lots of Aucklanders, indeed people from Hamilton and all around, head to the Coromandel for the school holidays, and they're saying, we love you, but you're simply not welcome while there are slips and flooding and road closures. So do keep an eye on all of that, particularly if you're planning to set out tomorrow night. Lots of responses to Dr. Jan Wright, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, and people pointing out that when she released that report in 2015, it was rejected by the government. So we're going to keep looking at that. Someone asking why we are losing her, saying she's a great Parliamentary Commissioner. And on the subject of the weather, current weather predictions for tomorrow are that the Auckland region will experience extreme weather. They're not alone, of course. Auckland Transport Group Manager AT Metro Operations, Brendan Main, says if the winds reach the level forecast, 140k plus, public transport will be affected. The high winds are likely to mean ferry services will have to be cancelled. There are likely to be vehicle restrictions on the Harbour Bridge affecting double-decker buses with reduced services, and rail services will have to be reduced or cancelled. We're closely monitoring advice from the Met Service and working with Auckland Civil Defence, but it seems inevitable there will be service disruptions throughout the afternoon and into the evening tomorrow. Auckland Transport says it's also likely that there will be further flooding throughout the region. Auckland, Coromandel, the Bay of Plenty, and then heading south as Cook does down the east coast, passing near Wellington overnight tomorrow, ending up on Friday morning around Banks Peninsula. Do take care. And all of those areas, of course, will be on air tomorrow night and covering all of that. On behalf of our excellent, dedicated and fantastic team, thank you for being with us. We hope to see you again tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Weather forecasters want people in the Upper North Island to reconsider their Easter travel plans because of the approaching Cyclone Cook. The High Court in Auckland has ruled that excessive defamation damages against Colin Craig constitute a miscarriage of justice. A tourism operator who claims the opposition leader Andrew Little defamed him intends continuing his legal battle. And America's United Airlines is desperately trying to salvage its reputation after an incident in which an elderly doctor was physically dragged off an overbooked plane. Our next news and weather is at 7.
I have in mind a cartoon, I might have just made it up, in which a mother, finding a bag of white crystals in her son's bedroom, says, "Thank goodness, crystal meth. I thought for some awful moment it was sugar." And amidst all the diet fads and conflicting claims, we can rely on something